The second half of the 19th century was a boom time for American cities. Although there were some large cities in the United States by 1800, it was in the late 1800s that large, thriving industrial cities grew to dominate much of the North and some of the South. No American city exemplifies this rapid development better than New York City. In the early 1800s, New York was already the largest city in the United States. 80,000 people lived there, crammed into the southern part of the island of Manhattan. For New York City to continue to grow, city planners created a plan for the future development of Manhattan. The plan showed an imaginary grid of streets. It stretched over the rest of Manhattan, where at the time, hardly anyone lived. This grid system was a great success. It was the only thing that remained constant in this always changing city. Another development that helped New York City grow was an expanding trade and transportation network. In the 1820s, New York State built a canal system linking the city to the Great Lakes region. Later, railroads leading into the city made overland travel faster than ever. Both this canal and the railroads helped make New York a center for world trade and attracted more workers and immigrants to the city. As the city grew, its leaders realized that it lacked large public spaces. So to give the growing population a place to escape the city's crowded streets, they decided to build a huge park in the center of Manhattan, Central Park. Today, the park looks as if it has been there forever. But more than 3,000 men worked more than 10 years to transform the middle of Manhattan into this calm and beautiful area. By 1870, 50,000 workers were commuting to Manhattan every day from Brooklyn across the East River. City leaders realized that the companies that ran ferry boats to move these people would soon be unable to handle the growing numbers. So they launched an ambitious engineering project, building the Brooklyn Bridge. When the bridge opened in 1883, it was the longest suspension bridge of its day. The lattice work of cables supporting the road and walkways is an amazing piece of engineering. The Brooklyn Bridge was so well engineered that it holds the weight of 144,000 vehicles that cross it every day, even though it was not built with cars in mind, because they were not yet in use. At the same time the bridge was being built, New York was leading the way into a new technological age. An invention adopted there first would change the world: electricity. The man who sparked the electrical revolution was Thomas Edison. Edison chose an area in downtown Manhattan to become the first district wired for electricity. In just 18 months, workers built the first power station and laid nearly 80,000 feet of underground cables. At 3 p.m. on September 4, 1882, Edison flipped the master switch. The lights came on, and as darkness slowly descended, the lights got brighter. That night, the area was like a wonderland. New Yorkers saw a strong, steady light, not the flickering gaslight that people were used to. Electric street lights allowed workers to travel to and from work more safely at all hours. Cities could now operate 24 hours a day, every day. But New York was not the only city experiencing rapid change. While New York would eventually become famous for its skyscrapers and subways, it was not the first American city to have either. Nearly 800 miles to the west, Chicago was experiencing a rebirth. In 1871, Chicago was engulfed by a devastating fire that killed hundreds of people and destroyed a large portion of the city. The people of Chicago quickly began rebuilding. This time, they used more modern materials, building techniques, and technologies. Architects in other cities across the United States were making their large buildings out of bricks, mortar, and iron. Chicago was the first city to use a steel frame to support a building. Chicago's home insurance building, built using a steel frame, was completed in 1885. Though it was only 10 stories, it was the world's first skyscraper. Steel frames allowed buildings to be built much taller than their brick counterparts and became a key principle in skyscraper engineering. Within decades of the fire, Chicago was flourishing again. Between 1870 and 1900, Chicago grew from a city of fewer than 300,000 people to one holding nearly 1.7 million. While Chicago was spearheading the architectural move to build skywards, Boston was marking a first in the opposite direction. In 1897, Boston's Tremont Street subway became the nation's first underground subway system. The new forms of transportation available in the late 1800s, such as subways, horse-drawn or electric trolleys, and elevated railroads, allowed cities to expand over larger areas and attract even more people. Many people who lived in rural areas flocked to the growing cities to find jobs in the factories there. In 1860, only 1 American in 6 lived in a city. By 1890, 1 in 3 did. Immigrants entering the country also streamed into the cities looking for work. Between 1870 and 1900, people came to the United States from Europe in record numbers. During the 1880s alone, around 5 million immigrants entered the country. The rapid growth of cities caused housing shortages. City dwellers often were forced to live in cramped, crowded, and unsafe lodgings called tenements, and city leaders had to scramble to keep up with the demand for safe water and sewage treatment. Despite these hardships, the rapid industrialization and urbanization of the late 1800s helped form the foundation for modern society. What factors led to the growth of New York City? Which change do you think most affected urban life in the late 1800s?